with the Hubscale podcast, where we dive into the minds of security leaders all around the world. This week, we have Guy Rinat, the co-founder and COO of Dscope. They raised 53 million in seed round, and he's a serial entrepreneur with 2 acquisitions from McAfee and Palo Alto Networks. It's super excited to dive into a lot of these topics today. Guy, it's great to have you on.
Thank you for inviting me, Elliot. Great to be here.
No problem at all. So I guess in terms of anybody listening, it'd be great to give a quick introduction to yourself.
Sure. So I've been in the past 20 years working for 3 startup companies. Was the VP of R&D at Centrigo, a database security company that was founded in 2006, got acquired by McAfee, once the biggest security company in the world. We got acquired in 2011, just 4 hours before McAfee themselves got acquired by Intel. Worked there for as a VP of engineering at the endpoint BU, and then in 2015, again co-founded the Misto with my partners in crime. The Misto was a SOAR platform. We got acquired by Palo Alto Networks in 2019, where I was the VP of engineering in the Cortex business line. And 3 years after that, again with with the same partners to crime, we co-founded Descope, where we're building an authentication platform for app developers, platform that helps every developer to build secure, frictionless authentication for any application. Basically, our goal is to move every app out there to the passwordless era.
Yeah, it's super. It's a really, really exciting journey that you've been on personally. And we was just talking before the podcast around the group that you've got together around building a company with your friends again. It's really, really interesting. I'd love to dive into a little bit about more about Dscope. I'd be great to hear about your kind of co-founders and a little bit of that story as well, because it's fascinating.
So I think that with Dscope, the main difference from the previous startups is that we actually targeted a big problem. We were fortunate enough with the third company to actually be able to raise enough funds, as you said, so quite a big round, to tackle and to target something that an existing market, a market that is already there, and that we can build a really big company. Unlike the previous 2 companies that we've built, where we started a new category, which means that when you start a new category, the growth pace is way slower. So you cannot really compete with the big competitors in the world, and this time that's the target, to actually build a company that we can go all the way, build a real organization, a real corporate of our own.
Yeah, no, it's super exciting. I think there's kind of 2 things that we can discuss here, and one of the topics I'm super excited to dive into is, obviously you've created categories before, but now obviously you're going after a larger market. I'd love to hear the nuances between the both, and why is it harder to grow a new category per se than going into a kind of an established one?
So I think that the first thing that is harder, is way more difficult when you're building a new category. You don't really know if there's a need. To actually find a product market fit is way harder, because there's no real life customer experience. It's not as if you have a customer that is already using a product and now you're developing something better. You're actually solving a problem that sometimes the customer is not even aware of. In our Centrigo days, in the database security company, that was an uphill battle, because people were thinking, well, I've got an Oracle database. Their slogan back then was, we're unbreakable. So you have to convince them that they actually need to protect their database, which is a huge problem. I still believe in it, but it was really difficult to convince the customer that there is a problem. The CISOs were not very knowledgeable about databases. The database administrator knew that there was that the databases are vulnerable, but on the other hand, their day job was to make sure that the database is up and running and performing well, and security was very low on their concerns. So there was no budget there to actually buy a product for that, and there was no awareness that they actually need something. So you need to create a new budget out of nowhere, because the organization did not assign a budget to do that. You need to convince that there is a real problem. It's way more difficult. On the other hand, there's not a lot of competition, so you can actually build a very small subset of what the real product is and start selling. So your MVP is really minimal, because you don't need to compete with someone who's well established and has a lot of features. When you're going into an existing category where there is a huge company that already is doing really well in that category, it means that you need to develop everything they have and develop it better and come up with new things that they don't have to actually disrupt them, to actually become the new category leader. So this means that naturally you need more funding, and you need to build something very robust, very wide, from the get-go. So I think that when you're trying to disrupt an existing category, probably it should be not your first startup, because it will be hard to get the needed funding, and also experience is important at this stage, I think.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, you've just look what CrowdStrike and SentinelOne did, right? With that space, they just kind of reinvented something, and then look at them now. So I think it's an amazing kind of challenge that you're facing, Guy, and with your experience and the team's experience, I think it's a super exciting thing to do. So I guess just taking it back to that, because I know I've done a couple of podcasts with people who are creating categories like Dan at Dig Security and thinking like that. So just tell me a little bit about what you learned from that time. How can you actually make some noise in the market, and actually get CISOs to buy your product?
So it's not only with the current case, it's actually developers, it's not CISOs, but I think if we're looking at the Misto, which is a good example, and I must hand it to my co-founder Rishi, who came up with a brilliant idea, where we established a community. We actually open sourced a lot of the parts in our product, and created a community edition, which was handed out free to analysts in a security operations center that was our target customers. And we created a huge community, with Slack channel, public Slack channel that everybody discussed so many topics of incident response, not necessarily related to the Misto. And when someone wanted to start its own phishing playbook, for example, they would go into our open source repository, get our playbook for free, and then they could actually understand that within our playbook, which was excellent, they could understand that they can actually automate a lot of the things they're doing if they download the product, again, for free. So they did that, and a few months later, they understood that now they're doing a lot of work automatically, with instead of hiring actual analysts, but they've reached the limits of our free community edition, and then they had to go to their managers and say, hey, look, you know what, we're actually saving a lot of money and doing much better work, reducing the risk to the organization. let's spend some money with those guys instead of hiring now a dozen of analysts to actually do what they're doing automatically. So that was again one approach that helped us to create a lot of noise, a lot of buzz, and eventually, to be honest, we got most of our customers inbound leads that actually came directly to us, and again, brilliant job by our marketing team.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. It's all about being creative as well, especially the early days, right? But no, that's again, it's a really interesting topic about kind of early days. What do you do? How can you create some noise in the market, and then go out there and now you're getting inbound leads, which is awesome. So just talk to me about the journey of Dscope then. Obviously your previous business has been acquired, but tell me about where Dscope's going to be.
So with Descope, well, I'll start with the end, the end goal with the target. So the target is to eliminate a problem that exists today with most of the apps that we're still using today in our day-to-day. The use of user passwords, which is ridiculous at this point, and it's a huge risk to any organization. So we want to move developers to actually have passwordless authentication, and we want to make this as an infrastructure for them. The same thing as, they're not installing on physical machines in their offices anymore. We want them to take the entire authentication layer as a service from us, where they can get everything. They can get biometrical authentication and social network authentication and one-time passwords and SSO and so on and so forth. And they can actually manage the user journeys with a very simple drag and drop GUI without even the need to develop any code. So that's the end goal, and to do that, we want to build a really big company eventually, that will do that, and not just again a feature or something small that get acquired later by a big company. So that's what we do today.
It's definitely exciting, and I guess you're just talking about and kind of moving on to the next topic, really about kind of being acquired, right? It takes a lot to be acquired, and you need a lot of things in place. You're obviously going on a little different journey now with Dscope, but take me back to the acquisitions, and what did you learn from those, and what in terms of the listeners who's maybe going for that acquisition or things like that, just tell me what you learned.
So I think from each acquisition, I think there's one main lesson. Um, um, and that we learned the hard way with the first acquisition, which we didn't want to get acquired. But the lesson is that always have an option. I was told that by the senior VP of business development at McAfee. After the acquisition, I had long discussions with him exactly about that acquisition. So look, guys, you didn't have an option. We did. We were approaching you after we OEM'd your product, and we decided that we want to buy a company, to acquire a company in your domain. And if you were not selling, then we would have bought your competitor. And that's what they told us. We're going to buy your competitor if you're going to say no, and we'll let the entire market know that your product is not that good, and this is why we decided to go with your competitor after we OEM'd your product. Kind of an offer that we couldn't refuse, but like the movie The Godfather style, that was the case. And with the Mist, it was completely different, because that over there we had an option, a real option, that we actually desired, which was not to sell. We were thinking of we're going to build a big company, and when they approached us, we played hard to get, and they had to make the extra effort to actually give us an offer that we couldn't refuse, but the other way around this time. So I think basically having another option is the most crucial thing. Otherwise, you don't have any leverage in the negotiation. I think the second probably the second lesson that I've learned is when you go to when you get acquired by a company, it needs to be a company that there is synergy with your product, that you're going to be proud to belong to be part of, and that actually has plans that the product can thrive there. And I think that with Palo Alto Networks, we're very fortunate to have exactly that. And then, as we can see right now, our product over there is really booming. It's a very successful acquisition for both sides. So it needs to be a company that you really believe that will be a good home for your products.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I remember talking about how successful that product is doing with you as well on our previous call. So again, it's an amazing journey. And I want to take you back to what you mentioned there about leverage. You've obviously been through two different acquisitions. One was maybe you didn't have enough leverage, and the second one you did. How do you get to that point in terms of how can you control the leverage within a scenario and an acquisition?
Well, to be honest, to be honest here, you don't always have leverage, right? It's not. It's something that you need to build and to be focused to begin with. I think that in the first startup, we're not focused on that naturally. Things were going more difficult, was a bit harder, difficult times with 2008 hitting us really bad back then. So I think that again, you need to set your target. If your target is to get acquired, then start building the relationships and the options early, and don't wait for the first one to arrive. And when McAfee arrived, we didn't have any other option back then. And I think that was the problem. With the Misto, it was different again, because there was an option that was not a different acquisition, but also but us actually wanting to build a big company and to continue without being acquired. Nevertheless, by the way, we did get other options along the way. Some of them we refused, some of them we kept in touch. So it was clear that we do have an option both to us and to Palo Alto Networks, which again place the pressure on them instead of us.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. And again, great advice, great advice. I want to, as well, obviously raising a huge round this time. You mentioned something earlier on, around it helps being a multiple time founder, or you've had success in the past to raise this big money. Tell me why that is, number one, and number two, what lessons would you give to people in terms of raising funds, going out into a new venture?
Okay, so to start with, when you're a first-time entrepreneur, and with the first startup, 2005, 2006, when we started raising, beggars cannot be choosers. We got a lot of no's, so we couldn't raise a huge sum, and also the terms were pretty horrible. We knew that. It's not as if we chose to have horrible terms for the investment. It was horrible because that was the situation. They had leverage, we didn't. We wanted to start a company, and that was that was the outcome. There was no way around it. With later on, with the Misto, it's a different story. The market was much better in 2015. And we had a success story behind us. We were all VPs at Intel back then, so it's easier to raise money. I think when eventually you're raising and you can choose, really important to choose the right investors for the company phase. I think that is this is something that we've again with the Misto and now with Dscope, we were very fortunate to choose the right investors at the right time. You want to choose the VC that is very knowledgeable about your domain, that can really assist you, can really help you, and also that there's like good personal relationship between you and your board. So it's a really important decision. Valuation is not everything. People think that, I want to get the higher valuation. We didn't take the highest valuation in some of the investments, and that was because we wanted the right investor to be part of our team. With the Misto, we were fortunate to have Jake Flommenberg, who was the domain expert in what we did and really helped us at the beginning to build the right product. So he was our first investor. And again, it's really important to fit the right investor to the right phase. And Jake was just the guy for that. Later on, Jay Leak joined us as the second investor when we started selling, and he was an incredible enabler in actually selling our product to made a lot of connections. So it's really important also about the phase. Today we have GGV and Lightspeed as our investors, top VCs in the world with an entire support system that can help us with sales and leads and hiring and so on. So again, we are very, very lucky with Dscope and early on.
Yeah, no, definitely. I was doing some research before, and Lightspin and GGV, definitely one of the best out there for sure, Guy. I guess I know we've kind of give some tips there on founders, but I want to a lot of our audience and a lot of people that I've met, even when I went to Israel a few weeks back, are first time founders. Coming into this entrepreneurial journey from well-established businesses, but they're still going on this journey on their own. So I'd love to know, especially you've done this multiple times, what advice would you give to first-time founders?
So I think the first and foremost and most important thing is to choose the right team. I'm super lucky that I'm doing this with my friends, both the leading engineers and of course my co-founders, super smart professionals, but most important people that you can fully trust and enjoy working with because you spend so much time together. You want to be fortunate enough to enjoy yourself. You it's important. The trust thing is super important because you want to have people that you can lean on. Look, startup, it has its ups and downs. And in bad times, you want to have a support system that you can actually share the burden with your friend when you have a bad day. And if your friend is your co-founder, it couldn't be better than that. And again, I think I'm very lucky to do that with my best friends. So I think that's probably the most important advice that I can give. The second one is, again, choose your investors wisely, choose them for the right phase of the company. And also, I think something that really helped us with both the Misto and now with Descope is we actually raised money from angels and VCs that have a lot of angels supporting them to help us. So even if someone invested only $25,000 in our company, but still is engaged and helpful with a good advice, with recruiting important employees, with sales, that it cannot be replaced. I think with Demisto, our first two customers came from one of our angel investors, and we raised money from VCs like Circa Partners and SVCI that have actually a network of angels that provide exactly that. So this is really helpful, and this is something that helped a lot to initiate the sales at Demisto and in Dscope. What else can I suggest? I think the last thing maybe is really believe in the process. There are difficult times, and there are sometimes that you're not sure with your product market fit. Listen to your customers. Try to get in front of them as soon as possible, and get their feedback. But always keep in mind that some of them have very specific need, and you'll be tempted to actually give a specific customer this specific need, but you need to believe in your process. You need to believe in your goal eventually for your product and your vision for the product. And sometimes you have to say no. Sometimes you have to know that one customer request might not be repetitive, and you probably better off losing one customer, but building the right thing to actually get the market.
Yeah, I think that last point there is super interesting, because I was reading the Zero to IPO book by the Okta co-founder. And he says that exact point, right? About if you go to a large customer and they're asking for so much to be changed, it's as much as it is hard it is to say no, you have to say no. Otherwise, you're going to end up doing something completely different that will probably ruin your company in the end.
Yeah. So again, back to being fortunate about my co-founders. Our chief product officer, Dan, is really experienced, and I think this is the first lesson that I've learned from him. So having a strong product guy and experienced one is also very important. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. Well, look, we're actually getting to the end of the podcast now, Guy. But I always like to leave with this one question. If you had to go back to the beginning of your career, what would you say to yourself going back?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. So first of all, I wouldn't change a thing. And I must say that I wasn't, unlike a lot of young people today. That's a very old. Being old enables me to say that thing. So I think we were, at least I was, less planned. I didn't have like, this is my career path. Those are the steps that I need to take exactly. Just kind of rolled. So it was less planned. But if I need to stick to something that we did in every phase, and I'm really, really happy about it, is doing things with my friends. Life's too short. We're very fortunate to be in this time and this era that we can do things that we really enjoy. So doing it with your best mates couldn't be better than that.
I love it. I really do. I really do. And even with myself, we've got two free people, people I've known for 7-8 years as well. So I really feel that guy, and it's great advice as well. And even going back to that, the starting days about finding the right people at the beginning. If they're your friends, then that's even better, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
But appreciate you, guy. Really, really good conversation. Honestly, I've actually learned a lot from this conversation. As you can tell before the podcast, I was super excited for this. So thank you so much for coming on the show, and really, really excited to see where Dscope goes over the next few years as well. I'll be watching from the sidelines for sure.
Thank you for it.